Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sudozi Finance Friday. Every Friday, we speak with an amazing strategic finance leader. And today have the opportunity to speak with Megg Meneguzzi from Figma. Welcome, Meg.
Hi, Rose. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I'd like to go back to the beginning quickly. And you actually didn't start out in strategic finance. If you don't mind, share a little bit about your thoughts of going into the consulting world and what that was like coming out of school.
Yeah. First, I want to go back to my early days because my inspiration throughout most of my career has been my parents. My parents are small business owners, Rose, and so I watched them start and grow their businesses as a kid. And for me, the pulse of everything I've done in my career has been that. It's been watching them invest with their customers and their employees and build businesses that are really people first, right? That really center the customer and empower the employee to make something for them. And when I realized that I thought that was awesome and really purposeful, I decided I wanted to go to business school. And I think the fundamental question for me at that time was, how do great leaders, both of like small local businesses all the way up to Fortune 500s,
Hmm.
grow great businesses? And I'm sure you have some moments like that in your career that like made you feel the click. But that was the click for me. I followed that click first to B school, where I did a lot of local management consulting projects as a student, basically exchanging my time for learning opportunities with
Yeah.
businesses in food and bev, retail, like, just all the community businesses that make it happen. And that was a pulse for me that made me think, hey, consulting could be a really cool career to, get my feet wet in a bunch of different industries, see a lot of different functional expertises, and then find my fit. I had an awesome opportunity to work for Accenture while I was in school in their management consulting practice. And while I was there, I realized that I loved the opportunity of working with business leaders, identifying their key problems, and like structuring an engagement towards an outcome. But I also realized I loved having community in place. I wanted to be more embedded in some of these companies longer term so that I could
Hmm.
my
Like, I
leadership.
want more. I want to work with them more.
Totally. Like, get to know my leadership, get to know my team. Go from like having identified the problem and putting in a MVP solution to
Yep.
watching whether that solution was successful. And so that made
Yeah.
me realize that I needed to be embedded. And for me, finance was the place where I could do a lot of the same work, but do it from within the structure of a solid team and solid company.
Makes sense. And so you found your way to Salesforce, and when you joined, there must have been some new sort of cadences, practices within FP&A and finance that you hadn't seen in consulting. So I'd love to hear sort of what were your aha moments when you first got to Salesforce on learning like both the accounting side as well of how things come together.
Absolutely. I would say my first year and a half of being at Salesforce was learning how to be a great finance business partner. I was first set up in alignment with our post sales organization, managing support of our support organization, our CSMs. And
Hmm.
the problem that became apparent in my first year and a bit was that we had a lot of leadership transition in that organization and changing priorities. And it had left us in this environment where we'd built out a really robust CSM motion with CSMs aligned by segment, country, industry, but we had really underinvested in our direct support line. And my first, set of learnings was around trying to help that business course correct a little bit, and find ways that they could, you know, convince the company to reinvest in support. Our first step was really just educating folks about like what we needed to do in order to invest in both tooling and technology for that organization, as well as like the right hiring capacity using strategies that like still made it budget
Yeah.
efficient, like outsourcing, figuring out how to use low cost location strategy, and like home growing talent, right? Getting people in the door early and then actually giving
Yep.
them career opportunities. So I'd say that was the first year and a half of my learning. And
Yeah.
it was amazing. It also just opened up so many questions for me about where I could take my finance career next.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a super interesting story because you're in this finance role, but yet you're really consulting on the strategy and efficiencies and how to make that customer journey and customer experience better, not only at the success level, but also any sort of day-to-day interactions as well. If you could remember, so maybe share a little bit about the processes and specific metrics that even identified this as an issue for the team, because I think as we move forward into 2023, I was like, what year is it? 2023, support and success of existing customers is going to be a huge theme as companies look to retain and grow as well. But as we all know, the growth is going to be tricky. So yeah, I would love to hear the identifications of even putting resources on that support infrastructure.
Yeah, I would say we were seeing a few things that were crystal clear. We were watching our backlog of ticket volume kind of skyrocket to a place it had never been after a handful of years where the team had like just cyclically had their
Mm-hmm.
budget almost grow less than run rate. They were being asked to
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
find efficiencies without investing in initial technology. We
Right.
were
Right.
finding that some of the like response on our customer support feedback forms was showing like drops in CSAT and areas that we deprioritized. And then honestly, we were seeing some benchmarks of employee satisfaction and
Mm-hmm.
ultimately employee retention show signs of weakness, right? We were seeing, I would say, upwards of like 9% a quarter of attrition in certain areas of our product support org. And that was because folks were really feeling the burnout and like not finding a career opportunity. And we were able to kind of coalesce those metrics into a story about an org that perhaps wasn't receiving the investment it needed to drive long-term customer satisfaction.
Makes sense. Last question on this, and then we'll move forward and continue your transition to Figma. In those months and quarters when you were working on this initiative, how much time were you in Excel or in the numbers? Like, here's a scenario for this support model. Here's a scenario for this, versus out in the business talking to the success managers, the support leader, different territories. What was your time split like?
Yeah, I would call it almost a 50-50. And I don't know if that's a perfect gauge, but I would say the answer is
Yeah.
there's some amount of like initial problem scoping you need to do that's really about being in the
Right.
field.
Right.
Then once you have a sense of like, what are the anecdotal problems, you're then trying to figure out like, where's the data and does the data support that story? If not, like, how can we keep doing this like balance of listening to the business and looking at the data to
Yep.
refine the narrative? And
Yeah.
once you have a data narrative, you need to socialize it. You need to get feedback. You need to make sure people are aligned. And honestly, you need both your finance and your business teams to be telling the same story to their leadership.
Right.
So
Right.
there's confidence that both like the company hat and the customer hat are being worn in making the decision.
Awesome. Thanks for those tips. I think super helpful for those out there thinking through that success support and also the balance of the finance team time to shepherd that change. All right. Now you're growing at Salesforce. Things are going well. Share a little bit about your transition, your growth there, and then transition to Figma.
Yeah, I was really fortunate to have a great network at Salesforce. And I built that network slowly by reaching out to folks who were doing exciting work and asking them to share a little bit more about what they were doing, what its impact was in the company, and like where they might have opportunities. And it just so aligned that as I was wrapping up some of the big initiatives I've been driving and support, there was an opportunity to join our long range planning team. I had always known that after I did a business partnering role, I wanted to have more of the corporate lens
Mm-hmm.
on
Mm-hmm.
FP&A because I knew in my tool set, I needed an understanding of how companies set targets and then drive towards managing to.
Yeah.
And the long range plan was an awesome opportunity for me because Salesforce has a really great rigor around tops down and bottoms up long range planning that facilitates basically the communication across the investor pool, the board, the C-suite, and the folks on the ground who manage to the performance against key metrics. And watching that process unfold was hugely informative for me. And then ultimately being able to drive some improvements in it was great too. And that was the click for me that, I loved learning about how to do this. And I wanted to do it in an environment that was a bit smaller, where not only could I run an awesome long range planning process, but I could take that into short-term planning and management. And so my, new career goal was, how can I find somewhere smaller that's going to be able to give me the opportunity to go do some of the hands-on work.
Yeah. And maybe even set up the processes for the long range plan, or, both the tops down, bottoms up version, and get that infrastructure stood up. Awesome. Yeah. So you landed at Figma. And, we were chatting before this. I love the product. Everyone at Sudozi loves the product. We're not alone. So what, I don't know how much convincing it took, but what made you choose Figma? And talk about some of the first few months there.
Yeah, I think my why Figma is threefold. I mean, number one, it goes back to my career why. I love businesses that are customer centric and that empower the employee to really build something amazing for the customer. And I could see that journey so at the heart of Figma. We spent many years building the core technology before we even went to market. We have always been big beta testers of our product. We really wanted to work for the customer. And that was so in the DNA of the company, and so clear in the way folks spoke to me during interviews. Second thing was, I really wanted to land with a team that was smart, that was kind and driven and wanted to invest in me. And I found a great manager, Nicole Whitland, someone who I had exposure to at Salesforce, who really wanted to grow my career. And to have that kind of leader over me was life-changing, honestly. She has given me so much opportunity to run with it. And thirdly, it was really what did I want to learn? And what I wanted to learn was how to stand up financial process and tooling from scratch.
Yeah. So you come in, you're one of the first finance hires at the company. And you're like, oh my gosh, there's so much to do, both on the business partnering side, on the modeling, key metrics, I'm sure, reporting. How did you think about growing the finance team and being part of that sort of backbone, if you will, of metrics, of having the right information out to the business and pulling the right information in, and potentially, public readiness? You're getting bigger as a company. Walk us through that journey, particularly focused on, again, that split of process and talking to the business versus being in the model, being in, more of the technical things.
Yeah, great question. I think we had three mandates when I joined. The first was to build out a functionally aligned finance team so that each leader had someone who was really getting to know their priorities, their metrics, and was helping them with performance management on that front. I think the second piece on performance management was building out a rigorous process around an already excellent data infrastructure that was all about weekly review of our key metrics, performance against them, and course correction in product investment, et cetera, so that we could keep managing to our goals.
Weekly.
Go ahead.
Oh, it was weekly, right?
Yes. And that really is a testament to the data infrastructure that was set up, especially on the top line. We were able to see changes, especially in our self-serve performance business, at that cadence and make adjustments to the product. And I think weekly is a cadence that was very different than what I'd seen at Salesforce, a company that was built more on tooling and had a lot more of a actuals reflection than it did a true real-time
Real
view.
time.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. And then final component for us of like public readiness and the mandate was about tooling. We,
Mm-hmm.
in spite of having great visibility via, Snowflake and some of like our great data infrastructure, we just didn't have our financial planning models and tooling
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
place. We were like piping all this data into Excel and then like
Yes.
building massive
Pivot
modeling.
tables.
Yes. So everything was breaking constantly and like files would start to like shut down on our laptops. We were replacing our, hardware every few months because it was overheating. And we just knew we needed to be somewhere in the cloud. We needed to be doing things real time where the end user could meet us in the model and work with us.
Awesome. All right. So you stood a bunch of things up. Now we're at the end of 2022, going into 23. You've built out a great structure. You have some amazing department leaders who you partner with to help manage efficiencies and investments in the business. How do you think about that collaboration, especially going into next year? Maybe even just share some of your best practices on data sharing and cadences, whether it's monthly reporting, weekly reporting, things like that.
Yeah. So, like I shared, we have a really great performance management cadence, especially on our top line. We are still in the process of working through some of the data infrastructure and like reporting out to the business, especially on the headcount and OpEx side. I can say so many things here, but for us, like the process on both of those metrics is really establishing, true real-time visibility into
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
our spend and headcount progress. And then from
mm-hmm.
there, in accountability structures. And so I'm happy to like dig in a little bit more there, but I would say our best practices are still evolving across a lot of our metrics.
Yeah. No, that's what we hear at young companies and even established companies, right? Because the process is not static, especially as the market is moving and things are very dynamic. And so I think one thing you've said consistently is just the people, right? Having those relationships, keeping those communications open, being transparent about the data, and being dynamic about what needs to happen, particularly on the department level and as budgets change next year. All right. I know we're already over time. I could keep doing this for at least 20 more minutes, but last few minutes here, shifting gears from finance. You lead the ERG. I'm not. You can pronounce it because I'm not sure how to pronounce it. You lead the ERG at Figma. Share a little bit about what that's all about.
Yeah. Figma has an amazing grassroots led employee resource group network. And one of our foundational employee resource groups is our women's group. It's a group that brings together women and non binary folks at Figma and just provides a safe space to talk about what we're going through, to meet each other, invest in each other's careers, and help each other grow. And it's been an amazing experience for me to have the opportunity to put together programming that speaks to issues that women and non-binary folks experience in their careers, as parents, as siblings and friends. And I am just deeply grateful to the community. So it's just like a great place for me to have other touch points at work outside of my day-to-day in finance.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm not in the community. Obviously, I'm not at Figma, but I send appreciation on behalf of that community for you, for everything you do there and that leadership that's completely outside of budget versus actuals and weekly. But it really shows your strategic perspective on how to build that company, right? Going back to the beginning, build that company that is focused on the people and the community. All right. Unfortunately, we do need to wrap up here and let you get going in the day. Plug for Figma and fun fact about Megg.
Yeah.
Wrap things up.
I can say Figma is doing a lot of hiring next year in spite of an environment that's a little more uncertain. We really see longevity in this space and a lot of opportunity. And if you love to build for builders, this is the place to be. In terms of a fun fact, oh, Rose, I don't know if I'm that fun outside of what we've shared, but I'll say it was a pleasure being here with you today.
Oh, thanks, Meg. Thanks. I really appreciate it. So many things and so many insights that have come up in this just in the first 20 minutes here. Thank you so much for being here, and hope everyone at home has a great Friday. If you're off next week, enjoy the holidays. We will have a special Christmas themed related Finance Friday next Friday. And yeah, see you all maybe in the new year.
Amazing.
All right. Have a good one. Thanks.
Thanks, Rose.